is Jeff Zito, and thanks for checking out another episode of the Celebrity Jobber Podcast, streaming on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Please subscribe, give a 5-star rating, and leave a review. Past guests are up on celebrityjobber.com. That big moment, what if it never happened? Some of these celebrities got famous by having a big moment. If that moment never happened, who knows who they'd be? Every story's different, and this one in particular is even more different than most. Kenny Wayne Shepherd has been famous most of his entire life, a child prodigy on guitar. I remember when I first got into the radio business, I was about 20 years old, and there was this kid, Kenny Wayne Shepherd, who was about 17. I first heard him play guitar. I was like, wow, this is a 17-year-old kid playing this? He's like an old soul. Regardless, he's 47 years old today. He had such a huge hit a little over 20 years ago with the song Blue on Black. It's actually been covered by a bunch of different artists, including metal band Five Finger Death Punch. So how old was he when he really got famous? What about his mom, his dad? Did Kenny Wayne Shepherd ever have a regular job? We'll find out. He's one of the greatest guitarists of our time. And I'm pretty excited because in the 30 years I've been in this business, I've never spoke to Kenny Wayne Shepherd before. And he's got a pretty famous father-in-law, which we'll find out about. Former child prodigy, bluesman, rock guitarist, virtuoso, Kenny Wayne Shepherd is my guest this week on Celebrity Jobber.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. If you like what you hear, please subscribe. What if these celebrities weren't famous? What would they have become? What was their first job? We're about to find out.
Hello.
Hey, what's up, man?
How's it going?
Pretty good. So, you know, what do your friends call you? Kenny Wayne? You got a nickname that they call you? Shep?
Either one.
Yeah.
No. Either Kenny or Kenny Wayne. Either one's fine.
Okay. You never know. You know, sometimes there's an inside nickname nobody knows about. I'm not trying to get too
Shep
inside.
Sounds a little too country club for me, man.
I never really thought of it that way, but yeah, probably not. So, you know, it's pretty interesting. You know, I've been in this business. I don't want to say just as long as you've been in this business, but I will say something interesting. Like the very first radio station that I worked at, I remember Slow Ride. We were playing that song, and you know, and I didn't know much of Kenny Wayne Shepherd at the time, and they're like, "Yeah, this guy's a prodigy, and he's a young guy." So when was that off Trouble Is?
Yeah, that was the second record, and I want to say that was the first single we put out when we released that second album.
I think so. That's still to this day great song. I love that song. So. You know, it's pretty interesting, too. I do a podcast that basically it's like a what if. Like, hey, you know, what if you didn't make it? You know, if you didn't get your big break, you know, what did you study in college? It's kind of funny with you. You've been famous, you know, or I should say in showbiz your whole life, right? You know, as far back as you can remember.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much, you know, and when I wasn't, my dad was a disc jockey and program director at several radio stations in my hometown. So he was kind of like, you know, the big, you know, celebrity, on-air celebrity there. And so I grew up around the music business and going to concerts and getting to go backstage and see the behind the scenes of the touring industry. And so all that stuff was just kind of, I was absorbing all of that, not knowing that I would end up becoming a musician for my career. But yeah, I mean, I graduated, you know, I basically started performing at age 13 and did my first recordings at 14, put my band together at 15, signed a record deal at 16, recorded it at 17, and graduated high school and never looked back, you know.
That's awesome. I mean, that's like what a wild ride, but, you know, well-deserved. I mean, how did you, I mean, you're kind of an old soul, too, because, you know, guys our age, you know, generally, you know, into rock and roll, and not saying you're not into rock and roll, because I definitely sense a lot of real heavy rock kind of roots in a lot of your playing, but you're a blues guy. You're primarily a bluesman. And like, where did that come from? Was your dad a big lover of that kind of music?
Yeah, I mean, we listened to all kinds of music around the house. We had country and blues and R&B and funk and rock and just everything in between. But yeah, something about blues music really spoke to me when I was a kid. I think it's kind of the passion, because like to play blues music correctly, you have to play it from your heart. You got to put that feeling into it. So even when I was a kid, I might not be able to relate to like what the guy was singing about because maybe I hadn't had a woman, do me wrong yet or whatever, but I could feel what the guy was playing on guitar. And I could like relate to that emotion. And so that kind of is what drew me in. But, I don't know, man. My music has never been traditional blues. It's been like blues is the foundation of it. And then we kind of mix all my other musical influences with that blues foundation to try and create something that sounds, fresh, new, and interesting. And so ultimately we do go every once in a while and do a traditional blues record. But for the most part, it's been contemporary music with me mixing blues and rock and roll together to create something that sounds new.
Now, I don't know if this is true or not. I read this somewhere, and I think it's kind of ironic because today just happens to be the birthday of the late, great Stevie Ray Vaughan. But I read somewhere that at an early age, it was a meeting between you and Stevie Ray Vaughan that really got you into this business.
Yeah, I met him when I was 7 years old and got to watch him play from the side of the stage. I was backstage and got to watch it like very, very up close and personal. And, he just had a tremendous impact on me. The way he played with that passion and that fire and that intensity that he had is like, that's all I wanted to do from that point forward was I wanted a real electric guitar because at that point I had these little toy acoustic guitars with nylon strings. And I'm like, no, I need an electric guitar. And I want to learn how to play like with that kind of fire that he had, and so he kind of was the spark that lit the fire inside me to do what I do, and so I owe him a lot of credit.
Wow.
And you can certainly hear his influence in my playing.
Yeah,
sure.
No doubt about it, without a doubt. So you said before that though you were playing with little toy guitars. So when was it playing around with toy guitars and then seriously playing with real guitars? How much time in between those two things?
Well, probably like, I started getting those little toy guitars when I was like 4 years old. So I could play like Smoke on the Water, Mary Had a Little Lamb, and simple little things like that. But at age 7 is when I got my first electric guitar.
Wow.
And that's when I started playing like hours and hours every day after school. I would just sit at home in the living room or in my bedroom with headphones and just play for hours and hours because I love to do it. And it didn't sound awesome at first. I mean, it took some time, but eventually I got it figured out.
You say you got it figured out. Completely self-taught. Is that true?
Yeah. So I took a couple of lessons. Like when I was in middle school, we had a guitar class that was actually offered at the school, which I thought was amazing. But I had already been playing. The teacher was a female, and she was teaching like the rudimentary, beginnings of guitar playing. So I could already kind of do that stuff. But I still took the class because I loved it. And then I tried a couple of lessons at the local music store. But again, I had already been playing long enough to develop my own approach to learning the instrument. And so trying to learn somebody else's way just never seemed to work for me. So I figured I was just best doing it myself.
And when did you feel, Kenny Wayne, that things kind of turned for you, like a particular moment? I mean, you kind of went back and gave me, your timeline or your resume, if you will. By 13, you're performing on stage. By this age, you get a record deal. I mean, it's pretty incredible timeline. But was there an instance, something that happened in your career where everything changed for you?
Well, for me, it was like when I got on stage for the first time, I was 13 years old, and I'd never really played in front of people at that point. And so that was a really pivotal moment for me. This guy down in New Orleans named Brian Lee, who is a blues player, he let me get up on stage with him, and I was only supposed to play 2 songs. And I remember thinking to myself, now this is either going to go one of 2 ways. It's going to go really horribly, and I'm never going to do this again. Or, it's going to be okay. And I was just like, I don't know which one is going to be. We'll see. And then I played the 2 songs, and I got my first standing ovation ever in my life. And then when I was supposed to get off the stage, and he wouldn't let me get down, he asked me to stay up on the stage. I ended up playing for the rest of the night with him and his band. And that that is what gave me the confidence to move forward with actually playing in front of people and thinking that maybe I could do something with this.
Wow. And then how did you get discovered, Kenny? Like, I mean, it's got to be tough, like in Louisiana. I guess it's different when your dad's the PD of a radio station. He's got a lot of connects. But how did you get discovered?
Yeah, well, we recorded these demos when I was 14, and then we filmed a concert that I did when I was like 15 years old. And so we had video and we had cassette recordings, and, you know, we just kind of like put them in different people's hands, and, you know, some one way or another, you know, the short version of the story is that word started spreading across the country about this child prodigy playing blues music. And word got out to California and started circulating amongst the different record companies, and then the phone started ringing. And the next thing you know, I was signing a major record contract at the age of 16.
I mean, did you ever, I mean, when you were going to high school and all this was happening to you, did you ever think like, okay, probably not, because you're a kid and you're, you know, not thinking of a backup plan or anything like that when you're a kid. You're all trying to reach your dream. But like at any point in time in high school, were you like thinking about a regular job, about maybe doing something, you know, as a profession that wasn't music?
Well, not really, but I wasn't thinking much about anything. I was really just kind of doing whatever the next thing was that was in front of me. Like, I knew that there was no guarantees that I would be successful in playing music. Like, I knew that very well. But at the same time, I wasn't expecting to be successful, but I wasn't expecting to not be successful. So I wasn't really going, well, if this doesn't work out, I'm going to do this or that. It's like, what's the next thing in front of me that I have to do? And then we'll see what happens after that.
Yeah, you were living in the moment, as any kid would be doing. What about a regular job, Kenny? Did you ever have a regular job, like a first job, a paying gig?
Yeah, my dad had a couple of, back then, you know, before there was phones with cameras on them and stuff. Right. The big thing was 1 hour photo stores where you could have take a roll of film in and have it, you know, developed and pictures printed within an hour. And my dad owned 2 of those stores. And so I was the delivery guy. So for his corporate accounts. So like, I had a route where I had to go deliver photographs to all the different businesses that had accounts set up with the photo lab.
Wow, man. You know, I got to tell you something. Us radio guys, we get a pretty bad rep for, we get a bad rep, radio people. And it sounds like your dad, pretty successful radio guy, was a concert promoter. He was, PD of his station. He had a side business developing pictures. Is he still in radio now?
No. He retired from his radio career when my career started taking off so that he could help me manage my business. And so we're still doing it together today.
That's great.
It's been a long ride, yeah.
That's awesome. That's such a cool thing to hear. I'm looking at a past list of these guys that you've played with. And I mean, tell me if you ever kind of think about this. Maybe it's just too far in your rearview mirror. It's just normal now. But I mean, I'm looking at, you toured with Buddy Guy. You opened for Van Halen. You've played with B.B. King, Johnny Lang, the Rolling Stones, Lynyrd Skynyrd, Aerosmith, Bob Dylan, the Eagles. The list goes on. I mean, is like, at any one of those bands, did you ever feel like you were in fantasy land at one particular point in time? Anytime you ever kind of, the young Kenny Wayne Shepherd kind of took the stage and you were like feeling like a child again because you're with these mega artists?
Well, absolutely. I mean, with all of them, to be honest with you, to varying degrees, because I grew up listening to every one of those artists. And, when I was a kid, they just seemed like, these entities that were out of the realm of normal people, but then all of a sudden it's like I'm traveling with these people and I'm performing with them. And so, yeah, I mean, to varying degrees, every single one of those tours with those artists was like a kind of a pinch me moment, if you will.
Yeah, I would imagine so. And Kenny Wayne, you guys are now touring, doing this like music of Jimi Hendrix, and you've got a huge amount of, guitarists on tour with you. So you're a big fan of Jimi Hendrix, number one, and number two, how did this whole thing start off?
Yeah, well, Jimmy is absolutely one of my biggest influences, and you can hear it in my playing. So for me, it was a natural thing to be a part of, and there's so many great musicians that are on this tour. And the cool thing is not all of them are blues players or rock players. Like, a lot of different musicians from a lot of different genres, and it just goes to show how wide the reach of Jimmy and his music is, and how many people he's influenced on a musical level. And so we're all coming together and paying tribute to arguably the greatest guitar player of all time, and he's got a great catalog of music to choose from. So we all have fun playing the songs that we get to play, and I think the fans really enjoy it.
Do you do Voodoo Child yourself?
Oh, yeah. I mean, every show I've played almost for my entire career, that's always been the last song of my show. And so, yeah, I'm doing that along with about 4 other songs during the show. So, I have a good little set that I get to do, and each one of those songs I feel like we do well. And
you got Zakk Wylde on tour with you. There's, I mean, how many different, I guess it changes in every city, but who are the main guys you're on tour with?
Yeah, so, we have Zakk Wylde, who's famously, comes from Ozzy Osbourne's band and Black Label Society. And then you have Eric Johnson, who's a guitar virtuoso, and Dweezil Zappa, the son of Frank Zappa. He's another incredible guitar player. And then let's see, Kingfish, who's a young blues guitar player, 2-time Grammy Award winner, making a big name for himself. And then Taj Mahal, who's a legend. He been on a lot of the shows. I don't know if he's doing the whole tour or not, but he started at the beginning of it. So just a killer lineup. I mean, there's more people than that, but that's just off the top of my head, some of the core performers. And, if you love guitar playing, if you love Jimi Hendrix's music, if you love American music and rock and roll, this is a show that you don't want to miss.
It's Experience Hendrix Tour, and it'll be at Ruth Eckerd Hall in Clearwater on October 17th. You can go to KennyWayneShepherd.com, get a list of all the tour dates coming to an area near you. I saw you on the G3 tour way back when. It was you, it was Satriani, it was Steve Vai, and Robert Fripp from King Crimson. Well, that was probably somewhere in the mid to late 90s somewhere. It was you remember that show, that tour?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, man. That was cool. I had done the G3 tour a couple times. That was the second time. And it was an interesting audience because like those guys, Satriani, Steve Vai, they bring out the real guitar fanatics, as far as the audience goes.
Yes.
And the guys that want to sit there and watch your fingers and your hands and every little thing that you're playing on stage. So it was an interesting crowd to play for.
I totally, I was almost gonna say it was like a really interesting crowd, but I didn't want to I'm not trying to say that they were weirdos or anything, but I agree with you. It was a very interesting crowd, and Robert Fripp, I believe, at the show that I was at, was sitting down playing. And yes, some of these guitar fans, they were just focused on every finger position and every chord and every time they struck the damn guitar. It was a different thing that even I was, not used to seeing something like that with the crowd. Like, you couldn't even have a conversation. Nobody was like, shh, like nobody wanted this. Everybody was totally focused in on the guitar playing. Yeah,
well, that's the kind of guys that, like to attend those shows. And frankly, there's a lot of those people at this Hendrix tour too, because you have so many great guitar players. So, the guitar players come out en masse to watch what's going down.
Is it true, Kenny, that your father-in-law is Mel Gibson?
Yeah, and he has been now for 18 years.
And is he anything in real life? Is he anything like his character in Daddy's Home too?
I don't know. I mean, to me, he's just always been a really great grandfather to my kids, and he's always been a great father-in-law to me. So,
that's awesome.
I've seen the Daddy's Home stuff, but I haven't seen it in a really long time. So I can't tell you how much he's like the character because I don't remember.
Yeah, he's like a real badass. He's like I think he's like he's Mark Wahlberg's dad in the movie, and he's like a real badass, like getting a bar fight in a drop of a hat kind of guy. So
right on.
Well, listen, man, your time is valuable. I realize that, and I really appreciate your time. And never had a chance to talk to you in the 30 years I've been doing this. So really glad I got the opportunity, and Good luck to you, and thanks again.
Okay, thanks, man. Nice talking to you.
You too.
All right.
This guy is a child prodigy. Taught himself how to play. His life changed, as he says, at 13 years old. This local blues guy in Louisiana named Brian Lee took him up on stage, and he played in front of thousands of people. And it was at that moment in time, he said it could go one of two ways. It can either go good or it could go bad. Who's going to boo a little kid? It didn't go bad for Kenny Wayne Shepherd. He became a star on that day. It's when everything changed for him. That was his big break. So impressed with the story of Kenny Wayne Shepherd and his father. Ken Shepherd, a radio DJ and program director in Shreveport, Louisiana. Not only that, he was a part-time concert promoter and owned 2 one-hour photo businesses. And I mentioned to Kenny, us radio people, we get, kind of a bad rap as being maybe a little bit of a bottom feeder of celebrity, if you will. But I really was impressed about Kenny's father, who, by the way, retired from radio and is managing his son's career full-time. And that's awesome. Such a great story. I just looked up Ken Shepherd on Facebook. It looks like this guy's living the dream. A lot of land in Louisiana, got some horses. Really, really happy to hear that Kenny Wayne Shepherd and his dad, the former radio DJ, have this relationship and working relationship and on this ride together, as he said. By the way, that was Kenny Wayne's first job, was working for his father's 1-hour photo store. I kind of thought it was funny. We're about the same age, me and Kenny Wayne Shepherd. But I thought it was funny how he had to, kind of explain to me what 1-hour photo stores were, because these kids today, they don't know their cameras are on their phone. Nobody ever takes a roll of film anymore and needs to get it developed in an hour or less. Anyway, his father owned a couple of those stores way back when, and Kenny was a delivery boy, delivered pictures to his dad's corporate accounts. So I thought that was pretty cool. He just released a new album, Dirt on My Diamonds Volume 2, KennyWayneShepherd.com for all the information regarding where you're going to be able to see him next. Great guy. Never had a chance to talk to Kenny Wayne Shepherd in my 30 years of being in this business, and I was really, really happy to finally get a chance to talk to one of the greatest guitarists of our time, for sure. And thanks so much for listening to another episode of Celebrity Jobber. You can check out our past episodes, celebrityjobber.com. Please subscribe, give a 5-star rating, and leave a review. Streaming on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Some great guests are coming up in the next couple of weeks. So thanks for all the support. Thanks for listening. I'm Jeff Zito. I'll see you next week with another episode of Celebrity Jobber.